Hello, and welcome to your Oona Series podcast. My name is Boniface, and I will be your host for today and your host for this series. We'll be covering subjects from physical, mental, and social topics to find and help to create tools to guide, inspire our community. Today, I'm very happy to have an amazing guest. She is called Catie Miller, and she's the founder of Oona. And in a minute, we'll dig deeper in one of our favorite subjects, probably one of the subject that has guided me into what I'm doing now and what has Catie become over the last years. And this is trying to find the answer, or at least try and look into the question of why life is movement. Hello, Catie.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me here on
Thank
the table. I'm honored. I am really excited to share our message with the community.
Well, Catie, thank you for coming. We know each other a bit, and I think this is why we're sitting here together today. But I want to move on this topic that has been pretty much what has brought us together. I'm an osteopath, as you know, and you are now a leader in the movement. And what movement? The movement here that I'm talking about is you're a leader into trying to help other people to follow you into movement, which is what I find quite exceptional. So thinking about now how you started this career, can you come back a little bit on who you are, but also what brought you to do that today?
Absolutely. So my name is Catie Miller, and I began my journey through dance. When I started from a really young age, it was something that was ingrained into me growing up in my childhood. And it's carried me through life. And I think now if I look at myself here today, it still is a big part of me. And the movement that I've, drawn out from my dance experiences and the discipline that I've drawn out of that, I've now taken into my career, into being a mother, into being a businesswoman, into leading clients, as you say, through movement. And after my dance days, I transitioned into Pilates, and I absolutely love it because the foundation of Pilates is so safe and effective for so many different types of bodies. And I think that, again, sparked a really big inspiration in me and in working with clients to see that, whatever stage you're at in your life, and I'm sure we'll dig deeper into that as we progress through the conversation, but it's really key to find a movement that A, you enjoy, but B, you feel safe and you feel that you've come out the other end well. I think that is the main goal. And I know we talk about this a lot, which again, I'm so excited for this podcast to give people a little bit of insight into the conversations that we have on the daily, because they're deep and they're meaningful and they're long. And I think, that's where I'm at right now with my career in the movement that has become a big part of my life and who I am now, is that transitioning into Pilates was an amazing experience, but I missed my dance. I missed that movement. I missed the music and the flow and the community that was built, because that community, I am still very much still a part of from my dancing days. And that was something that I just identified, that I felt it carried me through many moments of my life, and I wanted to share that. So I went on this journey and mission to open a studio and created a movement. And along the way, I've met some of the most incredible humans, all ages, just so much diversity within my community. And that's what I've loved coming out, knowing that everybody can get something from this method.
And what is the method today? How would you describe it? Because what I'm interested in here is that your journey is interesting because you've been through lots of different types of movement. And I think if we go back to the dancing, there's a lot of, as you said, discipline, but also, I would say, beauty, elegance, the position of where you look, le port de tête, as we say in French, where you put your arms. So there's a lot of precision in that kind of whole discipline. But am I right to say that you also were a cheerleader at some point?
I was.
You were.
I was.
Which we can see today. This energy just comes out of you, whether you're right or not. But what I love about this is that I'm going to take it down a bit to some physiology here. And because we know this is how we share our conversations a lot. You have this macro vision of what movement is. And maybe from my take on anatomy and physiology, I'm seeing movement from, I would say, inside out, where you look at it from outside in. And I think this is where we meet the most. And what I find fascinating, you'll have to elaborate more about being a cheerleader, because I don't know what it is really from inside, but you'll tell us. But what I find fascinating in having done a bit of gymnastics myself is that there's a moment where you train, and it takes a long time, and you start, because what is cheerleading is obviously lots of energy, it's lots of acrobatics, for example, and there's an immense amount of danger. Like, sure, things can go wrong, right? But at the same time, the things that you're going to perform are so quick that it's not something you'll have time to address or adjust once the momentum has started. So once the movement is starting, you have, and this is where I'm going with this,
yes,
you have to trust your body. So you have to trust that kind of, I would say here, neurological pathways. There's little connections between your synapses that you've created along the way, build up through this practice to get to, let's say, 10 years of practice before you can do a triple somersault, whatever incredible stuff you were doing. And at this point, when you go into it, you can't think of it. You have to say, I trust that my body can do this, and you just go for it. So that level of trust into your nervous system, being able to command your body to do something fearlessly, for me is a fascinating concept, because it means that you've been through extreme precision and dance, sure, then you've opened that world of extreme precision, but also danger, and also sure, it's connection. And then you came back now through Pilates, and now what you're doing now, to something that is a lot more integrative of a full idea of well-being, which is not just the performance, but yes, also the energy that I can build from movement. So lots said here, but you pick what you want to bounce off.
He blows my mind. This is it. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that with my career and my job, I'm still chasing that feeling. You know, that feeling that you said where, you know, I'm showing up and it's dangerous. You know, there's something going on in my brain, and it's fueling that love and that passion. If I pull apart your conversation a little bit and take it back to my cheerleading days, you know, thinking about getting ready for a competition, you know, it was a big moment that we were training for a year for. And, you know, that was showing up every single day, and that was tumbling. It was hard on the body, but it's also learning the conditioning of the body and knowing that it needs not just the power, the push all the time, right? It also needs the nurturing. It needs the rest, the recovery. It's so important.
Here I would say something, if I might. There's something very interesting, and we will touch a bit later, and it's about the idea that a lot happens when we are not doing.
Yes.
Which I want us to keep this in mind, because when we train at that level, there's a lot of issues coming from the idea of overtraining. And we could extend that to overworking and even what will become burnout. You know, you also have to acknowledge at some point, it's not just your muscle, your tendons that you're letting at rest. It's also that there is some kind of neurological changes in your mind happening when you're not challenging it. And it's I would say, deep processing. And I'm fascinated by this as well. I'm sorry, I cut you.
No, and I think it guides the conversation, right, into what I did then, and then transitioning into dance and Pilates. It was that I think my own mind and my own body was then starting to want to chase longevity, right? Because I really was enjoying the movement, the community, the energy, the feel. I loved that element, but my body couldn't keep up with it for that long, you know? And that's where you then start to seek out other tools to incorporate into your life so that you can have that fuel and that endurance to continue moving forward. And I think that's a really key point into why, when you and I met, for me personally, something clicked in a different way that I was missing in my day-to-day current life of movement and of fitness. Because, you know, you mentioned overtraining. You know, I teach a lot of clients. You know, I'm here, there, and everywhere. I have 2 children. You know, you have to then know your body not only needs, yes, an amazing workout, right? That's great. But then you have to start to incorporate other elements into your day-to-day, into your practice, into your discipline. That, like you were saying, your receptors start to then tune into that and know, okay, this is helping, this is working. And it takes a little bit of time to settle into that because it's a different rhythm.
What would you say was there are more than one, but what was the trigger that you felt every time you kind of changed? So let's say from cheerleader to dancing to Pilates to what you're doing now as a more integrative movement method. What are the little shifts?
Such a good question. I think it was a burnout. I think with cheerleading, I went so hard and I competed at a competitive level and I was tumbling and I was the flyer. So I was the one tossed up in the air. And
the one doing the somersaults I was mentioning.
There was
before.
a lot going on mentally because the pressure's on you, right? To nail it, to land it, to be there because everyone's watching. So I think that was one of the biggest, it was a big draw because I loved it. I loved the show. And we spoke previously, about that end feeling when you go through something and you're putting all the practice in and you finally nail it and you land it. You are so immensely proud of yourself. Yes, everyone around you is really proud, but the pride you feel in yourself is unreal. And I think that, again, takes me back to the chase of, wanting to show up and do it day in and day out. So with cheerleading, I think it got to a point where it was the burnout. My body couldn't take it anymore. My neck, my shoulders, my hips, my knees, there was a lot. And I was so young. And I think at that point, now in the practice that I do, I work with young children. I work with teenagers, all the way up through to 89, it goes on. And I think that is a beautiful thing to see now that I'm wanting to instill some of the tools that I know now, I wish I had known then.
And which are they?
What tools do I wish I had known then? I think one of the biggest things is that over practice and thinking that you constantly need to be doing the hardest workout. You constantly need to be in a state of cardio. You need to be working out 5 days a week. I think we need to define what that looks like because I do move 5 days a week, and I have now found my rhythm where I'm enjoying it. And I love that, when you and I talk and when I sit and have a session with you, it's that you help me draw out some of the things that I'm lacking and some of the things I need to start thinking about to balance where I'm at. Because there have been many times, and there will still continue to be many times where I'm unbalanced. And I think that is one of the biggest things that with these podcasts, but also with Oona Series, we're wanting to instill in our community that you're going to go through those constant waves, right? You're going to hit burnout. You're going to have a new passion and you're going to hit burnout again. But then how can we start to incorporate tools where you're then more in a state of constant finding joy in your movement?
So I'm going to jump in here with a bit of physiology because I think you've mentioned the word burnout quite a few times. And it's been thrown out a lot in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, it exists for all times, but it's been out a lot. And I don't think there's a misconception about it. I think there's never been a real explanation about it unless you really looked for it. And what is it really? And I think this is the misconception that I can see or that I can often hear from my patients is that we have a link between stress and something negative being very intertwined. Now, physiologically, and I know many people know this now, stress is a positive thing. It helps us to react to some kind of an emergency situation.
See, I loved this when you explained this to me because I didn't see it this way.
But I think people, it's sadly, and I love that you say this too, but it's sadly it's because I think it's become a big bag in which a lot of functional issues that patients were having wasn't really explained. And I'm not trying to point at anyone there. Before 20 years, if you came to someone that was some kind of physician or therapist and they were not too sure what was going on, we would say, are you stressed in your life? What do you want to say? Yeah, of course I'm stressed a bit in my life. Life is not that easy for most people. So, that's what it is. And I think it's true in a way, but we need to understand why stress is a really positive thing. And that hopefully will help us understand what burnout is. But to make it very simple, in a stress situation, your body will react in a way that your nervous system will fire into your adrenals and you'll have an increase in adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. You've heard those words before.
Yes.
And that leads to blood pressure coming up. It leads to your heart rate coming up. It closes and shunts your digestion because this is not the time to digest. It pushes the blood to your limbs, your arms and legs, so you can run if needed, and all the way up to your head, so your senses are in alert, but also so that your brain is functioning. Now, think about how much sugar, because sugar at that point, glucose, is the energy you need, will you need in a stress situation. It's grand. So suddenly you have this massive release of sugar in your blood, and this is called glycemia. Glycemia is the amount of sugar in your blood, and that will rise quite a lot. Now, if that happens, your body says, okay, this is too much. And then it's going to start throwing insulin to try and balance it out. That's what's happening in your body.
Sure.
What's interesting here is that because we are not predators, we became predators, sadly, in the last years because we're not doing great with the planet. But technically, naturally, we're not. Another podcast, we're not predators. And therefore, we, like all mammals, we're not predators. We're very good at being able to trigger that whole system. So basically, emergency, I trigger my stress response, physiological stress response. And either I can save myself, either I can't. But if I can save myself and find shelter, I'm going to basically go through a phase of regeneration, and I'm going to come back to a basal level where I can function again. And that's why I think this is what the mistake is. We can do this over and over again with a bit of time in between. But you could go out, if you're a rabbit, and have being chased 3 times in a day. You'll be fine. You're designed for it.
Sure.
Now, what happened to us? It happened that our brain, and especially our prefrontal cortex, this big brain at the front, has grown a lot. And this has become an experience simulator. So what a rabbit can't do, but you can, is imagine that you can be in a situation of stress, although you are not in it yet. So in a way, this is the difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is very objective. You see something, you're afraid. Anxiety is there's nothing here, but you're imagining it. Now, what's happening into your body? Your body doesn't know the difference between fear and anxiety. It doesn't know this in terms of physiology. So it will respond with a stress mechanism, but it won't go as high as the peak I was mentioning before. And when this happens, this doesn't go all the way back down and to a normal level. So now I have a low-grade chronic stress levels. And that can carry on for years and years and years, or months and years and more. And this is what's
quite
worrying.
Common, isn't it?
I'm seeing this on a daily basis. But coming back to what was interesting to our conversation about, for example, overtraining or doing things too much, is that we mistake that level of low-grade stress to be something that needs us to kind of fight it. So basically we think, okay, I need to do stuff. I need to try and help myself. And this is where we should actually let things settle, and we suddenly do the opposite. And this is exactly where we see, and you and I see a lot, people who are going to have counteractive behaviors.
Yes.
They're going to overtrain although they're already injured.
Yes.
They're going to overeat the wrong things because they find that, I need to get bigger, so I'm going to eat lots of proteins, but this is going to be a nasty. They're doing the wrong things because they've been misguided by the idea of stress is a negative thing. And I think this is where I want you and I, and this is what you're mentioning a lot through your kind of whole process of life and experiencing movement, understanding that all of this is only happening because of an internal motion of molecules and drainage and circulation. And this is what I think you now, and this is what I want to hear from you, is the understanding of how you've, by gathering all these different types of movement, from the most extreme, the dangerous, the acrobatics, the repetition of dance, now you found a real balance and a place where you can incorporate all of those in a harmonious way, safe, and I would say optimizing, but also potentializing physiology.
I so believe that. I feel that I am at a place now where I am enjoying my movement. And, I think when you think about fitness, for a lot of people, their first initial thought is aesthetic. And I think that once you can not put that at the forefront of the reason why you're working out and the reason why you're coming to increase your fitness levels, you can reap so many more rewards, and the physical, the aesthetic comes naturally. And I think that is a beautiful thing, is that, there are so many misconceptions about certain types of exercise. And that was one thing I battled when I first started teaching bar. People didn't understand it. And I think even for you, when you came to the studio, it was something that it piqued your interest. You were so interested because you had heard about it. You had clients who were coming to you who had done it. You had seen it, in the news, written all over the place. True. And you were thinking, why? What is this? And, even my husband, it's transformed his strength, his core, his posture, and that is something that I am now really enjoying sharing with my clients, because it is a place where I feel that I found enjoyment, and now it's time to spread that out. But I think for you coming into the studio and for me on all my different journeys through cheerleading till now, becoming a mother, pre-postnatal, something else that isn't spoken about enough when you're going through all these different levels is hormones changing. And I think that was something that I realized I needed a little bit more knowledge on, because I was finding that my training needed to change with me, and I needed to acknowledge what I needed at that moment. So tuning into your body, yes, you can ask lots of questions. People can give you lots of responses, but actually your body best.
I agree with that.
And that is something I tell my clients every day before I start the class, because I always start my classes, every exercise with a modification, and I increase it into an advancement. And I tell clients, you will change. And if you see me train in class, some days I'm taking the advancements, and a week later I'm taking the modification, because I know that's what my body needs, and I'm going to achieve more in that moment by stripping it back just a bit.
Well, here, you're touching on a very big topic of introspection.
Sure.
Which is, how do we look into ourselves without being non-realistic and being so over-focused about who we are, but trying to understand who we are. It's this big maxim on the Temple of Delphi saying, if you know yourself, and you'll know the universe and the gods. But what's interesting here is it's that it takes a bit of time in life to get there as well.
Oh my gosh, I'm still forever.
Exactly. I mean, this is the funny and an interesting bit for me, is that we're on this journey, as we know, and we're carrying on. But what's interesting for us now that we're still very young, but we have a bit more of life experience, is to see it in the younger people, and how there's also a blessing in not willing to go there, because there's a resilience in your 20s that you don't have in your 40s and eventually. And so you can do a few, not errors, but you can do a few things wrong, and your body will forgive you, and your physiology will forgive you. And I think in a big way, I cherish this too. And I don't want to get to a 23-year-old patient coming to me and say, I'm going to tell you all about this. It's not my place. I want them to also go through life and find the experience. I guess my place here is just to make sure that they have enough of that inner tuning to understand that some things are a bit too far. But interesting about introspection is the idea of overtraining. I did a little article a few years back that really backlashed to me. So I'm going to share this with you. And someone called me and said, do you think people overtrain? It was a journalist. I should have been more cautious, to be fair. But anyway. And I've happened to work over the years in some very, very good spas and gyms where one could argue nearly the best personal trainers, good nutritionists, and good therapists, etc., etc. And also a very educated population where we're going to these clubs. Nevertheless, the clinic was always full. Yeah. And I turned around and one day and I said, how have I not seen this before? We have an extremely well-educated, well-nutritioned, best possible therapists and practitioners, and we have 50% of our contingency that is somehow suffering from something. So this is little things. And a tendinitis here, a bit of a knee injury, a bit of a low back injury, chronic headaches, big changes in diets that sometimes work very well for some, not at all for others.
Yes.
But we were kind of implying some kind of recipe on people. And obviously we know this is a singular affair. People are all different. And it just didn't work at all. Mm-hmm. But no one really questioned it. And we carried on providing with all this. And everyone was like, yeah, I'm injured. Yes, this is painful. This is painful. I'm like, hang on, what are we doing exactly? And I think this is a bit what you might have I guess, experienced when you were at that level of training is that it seems that the best is the one who can train the most. That level of resilience,
Sure.
they can do it. It's not just they can lift heavier or run faster, that they do it over and over again. And I'm really thinking we have to understand how we need to educate people to understand how to balance this out. And I think with your method, we find this. I find this anyway.
I think so. And I think too, one of the biggest differences and the draw that I have with you is that we share very similar ethoses in that we look at our clients as a completely different individual. Everybody is, right? And we acknowledge that. So we don't put them into a box. And that's key. And I feel that with my clients, if I just speak personally, that's where I've now been able to draw more out of them, because I've now done a lot of self-reflection on myself and realizing, what I've needed through different moments in my life, being vulnerable, getting to a position where I've shared with you, I've had certain niggles throughout my body, and you've sat and looked at me and gone, you're too young to have that. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about, what are you eating? What are you drinking? What are you doing? Okay, let's change let me know how you feel in a month. And it was great. There are those fixes, not always, right? But I think sometimes when it was me, I needed to look into myself and go, okay, am I doing what's best for me for longevity in every area of my life? We're always going to have, the peaks and the troughs throughout, but I think it's the tools and it's the knowledge that when I know what I need to be doing, or when I'm educating my clients and helping them and guiding them, because I don't always know the answers, but I'm providing them with experiences that I've had. I'm looking at them as an individual, and I'm acknowledging and seeing when they need something a bit extra. And I think that's why, our relationship has really flourished, because our clients have really flourished. And it's just, we're feeding off of that, because we're going, oh my gosh, okay, we're really onto something. The way that they're able to increase their fitness level, their movement, their joy of life, that for me is just, I can't even put it into words, because it's a powerful movement that I'm seeing, and I'm wanting to achieve, like everybody, right, longevity. But it really, truly is an important part, an element of the method that I teach.
So coming back to this method, exactly, how has it changed in the last, I'm just going to take this as a frame, but 5 years, because that's roughly when that was the last change before this very recent one, where you went into a method that you took on, but you very quickly, you use it as a frame to build on. And you've changed quite a few things. So how would you describe, because that also is interesting, because you were changing at the same time, of course, but you had children in the same time. So, you also had to compose.
Packed a lot in 5 years.
You did. You had to compose with your family, you had to compose with the business, but also you had to compose with your body changing and the people in front of you needing things that you then started to see a bit more singularly. So I'm interested, this, I know you quite well, and I'm quite fascinated by what you can, let's say, how good at multitasking you are. But how did you see this in your patient? How did you change the method? So we're going back really more specifically about the movement. What do you think is the new method you have a bit different from, the method, or what have you reached?
I think it's interesting. When I first started teaching bar, especially here in London, it was a whole brand new concept for everybody. And I remember, that was my biggest thing, is hitting the ground running and selling bar to people before I was selling my class. And, that was tricky, because people would say, what's this bar A? And I'm like, oh, bar. Okay. So it's a fusion of Pilates and ballet together. It's cardiovascular. We hit moments where we increase the heart rate, we drop it, we're sculpting, we're chiseling, all these different elements in the class. But I would always look at them and just say, you just have to try it. Because as soon as you try it, we can really dig deeper into how you felt, because that is it. I always firmly believe in telling clients, do things that you enjoy, and the rest is history. Find enjoyment in your movement. So the method has changed in the last 5, 6, 7 years, in the sense that now people's preconceptions about it are starting to be chipped away. And the clients and the bodies that I'm seeing walk into our space all over the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so proud. I have
Yes.
clients who walk in who say to me, I've never exercised. Do you think this is right for me? And I'm like, yes. I have men walking in with their wives signing up, just hanging out to sign up. And I'm like, are you doing class 2? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, you must. And, now, and when they do, seeing the differences and the changes. And again, they walk out of that room dripping sweat, smiles on their faces, feeling the endorphins flowing through the body.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of men now are starting to take to bar because of the focus on the core. And more than anyone, the importance of strong glutes, strong core, strong posture. It carries us through life. And I say that in the sense of bending over and picking up a piece of paper, carrying your child,
Correct. Yeah.
all those moments where you need stamina and you need strength to carry you through. Because again, pairing the body, the mind, socially, physically, everything, it has to have that foundation of strength. So back to your question of, how it's changed over time. I think now I've really come to a point in my career that I'm falling more and more in love with it. And I think I've gotten to that place now because I have found the tools and I've started to connect them for myself. And that means that I can show up to teach my clients. Yes, I've some days had horrible days, right? I think that's never going to change, through entrepreneurship, through a pandemic, through, children and husbands, whatever. We love them. It's going to happen. But I think, now that I have found the pairings of the tools that have assisted me, I'm able to, again, build my stamina, my resilience, my discipline. And like back to your example of the bunny rabbit, I know that there's going to be moments of stress, but they don't last forever. And that's my biggest motto. I'm always saying to myself, this isn't going to be forever. So I have to pick myself up, and that's in any moment. That was from the moment I had my first child. I said, and there are incredibly stressful moments going through pregnancy.
Well, especially when your body is your work, so that
Completely.
was a big challenge for sure.
Hormones changing,
Totally.
all these things that I think it wasn't anything that I had known too much about. And it was only then when I started to find those tools. And, you are one of the biggest mentors of my life. And I am, but it's true. I think having that for me has changed the method, right? And the movement. And that's something that now I have started to see in my clients. And I've had clients come through the door who do work out 5 days a week, but they're all very cardiovascular heavy sessions. And then they'll turn and say, I'm doing all of this and I'm still feeling this. And I'll drop in can I create your schedule? Which classes I think you should be doing? Great, amazing. I'll jot down the different sessions I think they should be doing. And I had one client who was so resistant to want to come and do mat Pilates. It's just not sweaty enough. I'm just not going to move enough. I said, trust me. What that client has now, and I have seen them on their journey, what they have been able to achieve physically, socially, everything emotionally, because they have a very high stress job.
Right.
And now to see that the enjoyment of movement is not a continued stress from their office to their travel to the gym.
Correct.
I've now been able to balance that out. So they're able to draw from different tools to take from our breathing exercises, their posture, their core strength. But it's the mind-body connection that is the biggest thing in my classes.
I'm going to tell my story here with you quickly of how I came into the first class. You said it a bit at the beginning of this podcast. There was lots of people that I heard about this studio. I heard about you, about your energy, about the quality of the movement. But it's true, at the time I was still in a very high intensity kind of exercise. I was playing lots of football. I was doing lots of surfing. It was more outdoorsy, and gyms never really, I guess, did it for me.
Sure.
I should say that. And then my wife came to your class and she loved it. And then I hurt my knee quite badly playing football and had to have a surgery, and it was a bit complicated. And at some point, we'll touch this in a minute, but I got a bit depressed, because this is what we also have to talk about, is overtraining can affect the body, but it also affects the way you're going to process your endorphins that you were speaking about a minute, which is the satisfactory hormones that start flowing into your brain when you reach a certain level of exercise. And this is the kind of ecstasy you feel from the achievement, right? There's a chemical process there. Now, your body gets used to that, like to any other chemical. So when or if you were to train every day at a certain level and you were to have this level of endorphin release, the cells that will have little receptors for these will get used to them, and you'll need more and more for the same hit. So that's what happened similarly to alcohol, right?
Yes.
The first time you drink alcohol, you're very, very drunk. And if you drink a bit more, then you need 2 or 3 glasses to get the same level of whatever alcohol does to you. Now, the reverse to this is that if suddenly an injury, and this is my case in this instance, stopped me from exercising at that level, insidiously, I was extremely bitter, I was frustrated, I was irritable. Lots of things in my life started going a bit, my resilience was really affected. And the thing was, I was basically struggling because I didn't have my endorphin release. It just, and therefore my body was craving for it.
Sure.
So I had a chemical depression, that's why it was a mild one, but still I was presenting all those symptoms. And I needed to do something. And we know, coming back to the whole idea of movement, the only way you can, it's not true. There's 2 ways to trigger an endorphin release. One is moving to a certain amount of cardio sessions, and the other one is breathing. You can get this through transcendental meditation as well, but that's another podcast. But if we get to the idea of movement, I had, okay, what am I going to do? And suddenly it all came together. I was like, this is it. I'm going to go and see Catie because I've heard so much about her. People just tell me, and I know that I will be able to move in a safe way for my knee. The truth is, I got a lot more than what I came in for. And what that was this, what you described. But then obviously I'm an osteopath, and anatomy is a big thing for me. So it's difficult when I enter this space to not critical, but definitely observant of how we move, what we use, which muscle chain
so can I tell
use
you,
there.
when you walked in, I was so nervous to teach because I knew who you were.
I couldn't see it.
Absolutely.
But anyway, you did a great job because I was hooked after the first one. And this was interesting to me because there was such a variety of people. I will say mostly women, which is true, but there was such a different variety of body types, and ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph people. We can touch base on this later. We were, there was of ages, and when it was so diverse, and I thought this is interesting. And also there was this, that is you, and you have this energy that you're so good at giving to people, but also not depleting yourself up, which is a real skill that you have. And I think this is why you're doing this so well. But that means people get this. They get this energy, and then there's the energy of the group, and then people get together. Now, coming back to this is all about movement again. It comes out of you give it to us, and we are going to make it strong, and we're going to potentialize ourselves by the amount of resonance from all these different people moving together. And I was like, I guess because of my position really as an observer, maybe I was focusing as well to not hurt my knee, but I was kind of thinking, okay, what's going on here? And that really drove me to understand, or maybe to feel and touch, that there's a lot that wasn't meeting the eye that was happening here. And I think your class is an amazing example, because what you can do is deliver it every time. And that's the consistency of your level of professionalism, which is absolutely incredible. But that happens in other places as well. If you manage to find people and practices with which you can find this point of resonance. And that I want to bring back a bit of the idea of the body here, and what I felt, and why I haven't stopped since, to be fair, and how it saved my knee and my football career, which is not great. But anyway, in my head is great. And this was really the concept of resonance, which is it's a big concept in physics and metaphysics, but there is relevance to resonance in the body, energetically.
Sure.
And that's interesting because the body is such a parametric system. There are so many different tissues that are made of different type of cells and therefore have different densities, because we know that resonating systems will be responding to a certain type of density. Nevertheless, and I want to touch something that is quite recent here, it's called bioresonance, and it's been around for a while, but we couldn't measure it well, and it's only 10 years old, so it's pretty recent research. We started being able to isolate different places of the body and we could measure the bioresonance. Now, when these machines came out, everyone was like, okay, we're going to measure everything. And when we're going to measure the brain, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Like the brain is going to be, we have all the neurological activity. I mean, still today, we don't really know much about the brain, right? It's still this mystery. Anyway, here they go and they start measuring different places. So, everywhere. And the results were like, hang on a minute, this must be wrong. So they kept doing it again and again. And the biggest place where we have bioresonance is our heart.
Mm.
And people were like, hang on a minute, because the heart is a very simple structure. It's a big muscle that pumps 60 times a minute if you're in good health. And that's it. It's not that complicated. Of course, there's a few nerves. Of course, there's a bit more to it, but not more. But then this was the question that rose, is to think, hang on a minute. If this is where it starts, and this is where in history and in cultures we've put love, we never thought, why did we put love here?
Yeah.
Why did we just, why have all these different cultures that thought this is the place of the deepest and kindest feeling that we have, which we call love, we put it here. And I think unconsciously, when you look back at the way this place has been a sacred place through most cultures that have had no connection before, it's because of this bioresonance. Now, if I come back to what happens in your classes and about movement and about resonance, this is what I feel, is that there is passion, there is a real discovery every time into what you can give people. And you said it many times, I want them to feel happy into what they do, because if they're happy, they get more out. And I think, without being too soft here, but it's the idea of finding the resonance of love through the heart. And I think this is it. We have the same, at some point we just resonate because we have the same heart rate, we have the same breathing patterns, and we suddenly become all one big waves. And I'm not going to say we become one big wave of love, but why not?
We become Oona.
Exactly.
It's so true.
We become Oona, exactly. We become one for an instant. And we can try and stretch that time. But it's interesting here to find that this is what we need to try and find and get to. And the let go of that possibility of resonating with other people is pretty fascinating. Now, having said this, because of what's going on in the world at the moment, you've had to do quite a lot of teaching on Zoom or whichever the platform you're using, basically through screens. And I remember, and it's quite well justified, how much of that energy and all of that we've just talked about, am I going to be able to vehiculate through screens? Because we are quite against screens in a big way. We think, okay, this is mostly not transmitting that. But I think you have something interesting to tell us about it.
We've done it, and I think that just is one of my proudest moments, because not only have I had to challenge myself to teach in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. I've grown as an instructor. I've grown as, an individual, teaching, facing a camera, giving my energy. But now watching a camera and doing my left arm with my right and my right arm with my left, because I'm wanting clients to follow along and follow the dance and the movement. Mm-hmm. So I've, challenged my brain, and I feel I've grown my skill set even more. But the most inspiring thing, even when we teach these classes through Zoom, is the community can still come together and connect. Mm-hmm. And watching all of the boxes of my clients and new clients, because now we're able to tap in globally, which is
big.
It's huge. One of my classes the other day, I asked everyone to comment, where are you from? I had people from Peru, Australia, South America. I had South Africa, America, amazing. France, Brazil. Wow. It was so moving. But then to see all of the squares and the boxes moving on the screen together, that for me is powerful, because I always tell my clients at the end of class, thank you so much for showing up to be with me, but most importantly for showing up for you. Because I think that's what I always want that message to transfer out when I'm teaching, because constantly, and the letters and the emails and the lovely comments that I receive from my clients, telling me how much I give them, I will constantly tell them how much they give me in return, because that is the transfer of energy. And that's what I was seeking. And I wasn't finding that. I thought, you know what, I'm going to go on this journey and I'm going to build that. I'm going to create that, because I know that that's what I need to carry me through. And I've had many big life-changing moments, from moving from the US to the UK, leaving my family, my friends, the familiarity of my grocery store, knowing what brands to buy. Even that was really daunting when I moved here. Driving on the other side of the road, having to take my life in the UK test, becoming pregnant, starting a business, all these different, moving house, all these big moments. And that's what I want my clients to know, is that will always happen. Change is inevitable. We're all going to be going through that, but it's finding, like you said, that movement and that rhythm of knowing that whether you're together in a room, together in a virtual space, or you're carrying yourself through those moments, you now know you can tap back into the tools that you've learned in all of those spaces. And you know that your mind is strong, your body is strong, but you can do it because you've done it before.
Well, the word that comes to mind for me right now is empowerment. Is that you found a way to empower the people that come with you. And I'm going to be honest here, because I've seen that latest transition because of the global pandemic, and I was a spectator, but I was curious.
Sure.
I was like, is this going to work? Because first of all, everyone started doing this. Most of us who were training before in a way or another tried to carry on. And I know from being a therapist that lots of people really struggled with it. They just couldn't find the motivation, which you speak about a lot. They couldn't find a sense of community. They couldn't, find the energy when they go to the gym, when they go to a class, which is also what they were looking for before. And, a lot have dropped because of that. But this is where I find Oona incredible, is that not only is you managed to carry on transmitting the energy, but it grew from it. Not only the people didn't drop, but they attract more people. So for that, I wasn't thinking you couldn't do it, but I was thinking, how is she going to do it? And you did it. So I'm very impressed, and I'm one that has the chance to be able to do it as well. And it's been a savior in those moments, because this is a space, and you said it really well. It's a space where whatever happens in people's life or the challenges, they can just plug in for a minute, and they know that they find something that is kind of familiar, that they've, for some of them, known before because they've seen you in the flesh. But some people now that are following you have not even seen you in the flesh, and yet they can feel that. And I find that it's all these years, right? I think from this amazing journey that you've been going through, professionally, semi-professionally to start with, and all this. Now, it feels as soon as you start, Catie, it goes through anything, even through screen. So I think this is pretty spectacular, and I think people should try, because I'm sure they'll feel exactly what I'm describing now.
I think what I've also realized is, everybody they need a bit of support in finding their deepest motivation. So, with the Oona platform, there are options to join a live class, because people enjoy showing up and having that one-on-one interaction with me, saying their name, me telling them, I see, drop the hips, scoop the abs, melt the shoulders, all those different cues that I can give to them personally as I'm watching them. They're feeding off of that.
Right.
Secondly, I have clients who feel that if they were to join a live class, they might easily turn their camera off and get distracted. So they know for them, they need to maybe join a one-to-one session. And it is phenomenal to see my one-to-one sessions my clients showing up day in and day out, and the amount that we're able to achieve. And sometimes we stand there and chat for 10 minutes because what we can discuss and what I can discover and draw out in them helps us then set our plan for what's ahead for that month, right? Whatever they're going through.
Yeah, a bit like that gentleman you were mentioning before, that you kind of, in a way, took by the hand and said, listen, this is what is going to be the program for you. But I think people like that as well, to a certain extent. I wouldn't say they need it, but if you suddenly come and say, listen, I think I've seen something and I've understood something about you, your body, and how you're at the moment moving yourself through society and through this difficult life. I think if you do this and that, as you said before, you'll find bricks and stones to build on. And it's quite, these are foundation stones. And I'm very up for, and you know this because this is maybe one of the core of our connection, is the holistic understanding of an idea of health. And we discuss a lot being a third physical, a third mental, and a third social well-being. And as much as it is easy for us to say it, as much as it is easy for us to try and share this today, at some point you need to be able to deliver the message, but also to deliver it with something that is applicable, some things that you can take and do. And without being presumptuous or being patronizing, it's important that we get together and we hear what the people think when they hear this. How relevant is it to them to hear that, okay, you've had this issue or you had this problem, and it could be mechanical, it could be a digestive issue, it could be sleeping issue, it could be a couples issue. All of this will trickle down into this big pot that is your body, made of different systems, and we have to try and find a way to balance it out. And one thing we know now is that if we manage to find a safe, secure, inspiring place like Oona, for example, where you can, it's not the answer to everything, and no one thinks that, but it is a place where every time you can go back and think, okay, that has been a challenge to me. What do they have to say about this?
Yes.
And then that triggers, if this is just that, triggers a little introspection. So hang on a minute, I reacted this way to that situation. I replied this way to my wife when she said that. I replied this way to my boss when he said that. Or, whatever it is, we're going to start identifying the way that a certain level of stress, coming back to this, on my body is affecting my physiology, but also my behavior. And that's what's something that, we need to discuss as well, because what's important into the link that I want to do here, sometimes it's a bit long, my transitions.
No, anyway, it's so beautiful. You've given me so much food for thought. I have a lot, to even take from that and to say is, I think another big thing with my clients and, my relationship and the exchange of the energy is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big thing, right? My clients show up, some of them in their most vulnerable states. And that works both ways, right? I have to be prepared as well to be vulnerable. And it's amazing when the magic happens in that moment. But I think that's one element. Another big element is acknowledgement, right? So I've seen you, I've heard you. Okay. And then the next big thing is communication. It's the follow-up. It's the consistency, the discipline, not only on the client's side, but on our side too. And I think that is where, we've created an amazing space of change and safety and comfort for our clients to know that we can be trusted because it's an exchange of energy. They're trusting us, I'm trusting them, and the magic just breeds. So I think, back to what you were saying, that's where now the Oona series has become this place where the answers won't all be there, but the tools are there, the communication, the exchange of energy, the community, having that platform is something that I know I had wished I had during many different moments of my life, because you're seeking all these answers and you're going to loads of different places. Where do you go? But that is something that I will forever be is accessible to my clients. I received emails, I received texts, I received, messages, and I will always take my time to answer back, because that again is not only deepening their understanding, but also mine.
Right. So I'm thinking now that I think we've covered a lot
so much
together, and
it's exciting.
It was very exciting. I will maybe bring this to a bit of a closure now, by not just saying how amazing you are, I've said it many times, but by the excitement that I have in what you've just said, Lars. And I think if there's one thing we could hope to bring out of this partnership we're trying to create here, and not just the two of us, with plenty of other people, is to create a space and a platform where everyone knows that if you come in, there is something for you. You will be heard, you'll be listened to, you'll be acknowledged, and no one will be judging you in a way or another, because the community is such that everyone has something to share with the experience you're going through right now.
Yes.
And I want to bring all of this podcast series in a very interactive way. I know that most people try this, but it's true that we need to try as well to have a lot of people coming back to us with questions and things that they want us to go and dig a bit deeper in. We touched a few subjects today that we probably will expand on in many ways. So I'm just gonna say thank you, Catie. I'm so happy. It literally excites me to speak to you and to think about the perspective of what that can be for me selfishly, but also for the people that we already have a reach, that you trust us now, because we've been practicing for 20 years in my case, but there's so much more of the outreach that we can get. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed that talk. Catie and I are partnering in this incredible venture, and it's called Oona. You've heard it a few times now. We'll do many things together. We'll do things separately as well. Catie is the one who will overlook and direct and hold the fitness part of Oona, which is vast, and I will try and lead you through the wellness part of Oona. But these are not separated. We'll bring this together constantly. I hope you enjoyed this Oona Series podcast, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you very much.